Ian, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we can get started then by looking at a quick overview of the work in Vietnam. What's happening in terms of adaptation here?
Well, it's a very dynamic environment, and the government, I think, have taken quite unique steps over the past few years to really move ahead on a community-based approach to disaster risk management, as it's called here. But of course that has a lot in common with the subject of this conference, and the government has also introduced a raft of legislation to frame the context in which we're working. And we're in the process really now in the United Nations Development Programme, with whom I work, of supporting the government in the implementation of the strategies, the policies, the plans involving risk reduction, climate change adaptation, along with, of course, a vast range of other stakeholders. And we're very we have a very rich environment here with very active non-government organisations, both international and local, as well as a very strongly established system of what we call mass organisations, such as the Red Cross and the Women's Union. So these are all active in the field of community-based adaptation or risk reduction.
What kinds of programmes are there on the ground? Like, what does this look like in practice?
Well, for more than a decade or so, many of the NGOs and the Red Crosses have been engaged with smaller scale work within high-risk provinces, working with people in villages and communes that are regularly affected by different types of disasters. So it's involved from awareness raising and training through to a whole range of structural measures at the local level, which are increasingly informed by risk assessments or vulnerability capacity assessments that local people themselves are involved with and help to determine what should happen. On top of that, the government's programme has been principally around infrastructure, so mitigation measures for weather-related hazards. So the country gets affected annually by a large number of storms, flooding, landslides, etc. And so the two have gone hand in hand in a sense, the two approaches. But now increasingly the emphasis is on the former, on more localized approaches where the people in the villages themselves are seen as the decision makers. And I think that's a critical aspect of change in the country.
And what's driven this change? Is it pragmatic? Is it just simply more effective, or is it a desire really for it to be community-led for almost moral reasons?
I think it's probably all three, really. I mean, I think there's a realisation by the government that whilst infrastructure will play plays and continues to play a significant role in protecting lives, livelihoods, resources, etc., it's not the total solution, and the government's been made well aware by global major disaster events that infrastructure is only part of the solution. I think secondly, there has been through the sort of evidence base of good community-based approaches to dealing with such hazards, a realisation that this is also an important aspect, and the government is, I think, very much pro the idea of ensuring that communities are in the driving seat a lot more, and that's a major paradigm shift that's going on. Of course, it's not there yet, and there still will be challenges with that. But I think that these solutions that can be undertaken at the local level are increasingly recognised as being important in the total picture of how we respond to weather-related hazards in the context of a changing climate in this country.
It seems like Vietnam's really at the forefront of this work. What kinds of challenges are you coming up against, and what kinds of lessons are being learned, do you think?
Yeah. Well, of course, the scale of the problem is vast, but Vietnam's no stranger to dealing regularly with climate-related hazards. It's challenge really is to in the process of shifting gear towards a more balanced approach to mitigating the effect of these, understanding more of how in different areas of the country climate change will impact upon local people, obviously their lives, livelihoods, assets, infrastructure, the whole raft of measures. So it's a realisation this is a cross-cutting issue that all ministries at both the national and the subnational levels need to engage, that they need to engage with the range of different stakeholders a lot more. It's not, they have to move from a more traditional top-down approach to decision making to letting go more and enabling communities to be determinants of what happens locally. So that will remain a challenge for some time. I mean, things are not going to change overnight. But I think, as we said earlier, you know, that the legislative framework, if you like, is in place to enable, and not what we in the United Nations and others with us are wanting to do is support the government in the process of making these changes. The impacts of climate change, of course, are globally well recognised. We have to do and are doing more to help better understand how they will impact in different parts of the country and different sectors. And we need to learn from what we've done in the past in terms of reducing risk to different types of hazards, but acknowledging that these are only a part of the answer, and we need to look for innovation and new approaches to dealing with some of this changing scenario.
Just finally, what are some of the highlights of this conference been, or some of the most exciting initiatives or methods or techniques you've come across? What do you think you're going to take away from CBA6?
Well, I always think it's exciting that you're in a room full of people who are also struggling with the same sorts of issues and struggling in different organisations, whether they're in governments or small community-based organisations or in the UN or the Red Cross, to know that you're not alone, you know, that there are people working on these issues in many different places. And I think through this event we've seen a lot of willingness to share experiences and to share the challenges, the successes, and to learn. And I think that learning curve for all of us is quite steep. So the more opportunity that we have to dialogue, to listen to one another, I think that will only help. So I think that this is an event that has enabled that and enabled a number of well-motivated practitioners to come together and have experience of, learn from experiences of one another's work.
Ian, thank you so much for speaking to us.
My pleasure. Okay.